Let me tell you something strange that's been happening quietly for years now. We live in a world where people photograph their coffee before they drink it, where sunsets aren't experienced. They're captured, filtered, captioned, where pain gets an aesthetic backdrop and joy needs an audience to feel real. Every moment has become a potential post, every experience pre-edited for someone else's scroll. Yet some people just disappeared, not dramatically. No farewell posts, no declarations about taking a break or finding themselves. They just stopped offering their lives up for public interpretation. They're still there, scrolling, observing, living, but something fundamental shifted. They consume, but don't contribute. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you still open the apps daily, but the last thing you posted was months ago, maybe even years. And when people ask why you stopped, you don't have a clean answer. It just happened. Like your brain quietly decided to stop volunteering you to be seen. Here's what makes this fascinating. Most people assume this is about being shy, introverted, or disconnected, but that's not the full picture. The psychology behind why someone stops posting reveals something deeper about identity, control, and what happens when you stop auditioning for belonging. So why would someone who once shared everything suddenly go silent? They're still online. That's the part people don't understand. These aren't people who deleted their accounts in a burst of digital detox energy or made some philosophical statement about reclaiming their time. They didn't leave, they just stopped participating in the performance. You'll find them scrolling at 1 a.m., watching stories, reading captions. They see your vacation photos, your gym progress, your carefully worded opinions about things that don't matter. They're fully aware of what's happening in the digital town square. They just stopped entering it themselves. And if you're one of them, you know exactly what this looks like. You still take photos, but they stay in your camera roll. That beautiful meal, it's a memory now, maybe sent privately to your mom, but it doesn't need to become content. That incredible view from the mountain, it existed for your eyes, not for your feed. You've started saying, "for my eyes only," about moments that 2 years ago would have been instant posts. There's something else too. A strange feeling you get when you watch others perform their happiness. Not judgment exactly, more like recognition. You see someone posing for the fourth take of their candid laugh and you feel distant, like you're watching a language you used to speak fluently but can't quite remember why. The shift happened gradually. Maybe you posted something genuine and it landed flat. 2 likes, no comments, just silence. Or maybe you posted something and it blew up, but the attention felt hollow like applause in an empty room. Either way, something broke in the equation. The reward stopped matching the effort. The vulnerability stopped feeling worth it. You haven't become a hermit. You haven't rejected connection. Your friendships didn't disappear. You still show up for birthdays, answer texts, have long conversations over coffee. You just stopped treating your existence like it needs an announcement. And the strangest part? You don't miss it. You thought you would. You thought the silence would feel like invisibility, but it doesn't. It feels like privacy. And privacy, you're starting to realize, might be the most underrated form of power. Here's what most people miss about stopping. It's not about disappearing. It's about deciding what disappears from public view. Social media built an entire economy on one simple equation. Showing equals existing. If you're not posting, you're not living. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Your worth is directly proportional to your visibility. We swallowed this without questioning it, and it rewired how we assign value to our own lives. When you stop posting, you're not just changing a habit. You're breaking that equation entirely. You're saying, my value doesn't depend on your witness. My experiences don't need your validation to be real. The best moment of my week doesn't require a caption contest in my head while it's actually happening. You're reclaiming something that was slowly being auctioned off. Your right to live without an audience. This is where the shift becomes psychological, not just behavioral. Silence stops being absence. It becomes sovereignty. You get to hold things close. A promotion at work? Your friends know because you told them over dinner, not because 500 acquaintances saw it in their feed. A hard day? You processed it with your journal or your person, not by performing vulnerability for strangers who will forget it by tomorrow. Every moment you don't share is a moment that stays completely yours. Uninterpreted, unjudged, unpackaged for mass consumption. And here's the part nobody admits. This feels like relief, because posting was never neutral. It was always a trade. You gave away ownership of your life in exchange for proof that it mattered. You outsourced your sense of significance to a crowd that was half distracted and fully temporary. Privacy is underrated, because privacy is power. It's the power to choose what the world doesn't get to know, to decide which parts of you are public property and which parts remain untouchable, sacred, entirely your own. That's not withdrawal. That's boundaries. That's self-preservation in an age that taught us exposure equals authenticity. You didn't go silent because you have nothing to say. You went silent because you finally realized, not everything deserves to be said out loud. Let's talk about what was actually happening every time you hit post. You weren't just sharing. You were auditioning for approval, for relevance, for proof that you belong in the social landscape you're watching unfold in real time. Every caption was a carefully constructed pitch. Like me, validate me, tell me I'm doing this, life, personality, existence, correctly. And the wild part? You didn't even realize you were doing it. It felt natural, automatic. You'd finish writing something, read it back 3 times, adjust the tone, remove the part that felt too vulnerable or not vulnerable enough, and then hover over the button asking yourself one question: will this land well? That question is everything, because buried inside it is another question you didn't want to ask. Do you approve of me? This is identity crafting at its most exhausting. You weren't building a self. You were building a version that could withstand public scrutiny, one that balanced authenticity with palatability, relatable but not too messy, confident but not arrogant, funny but not trying too hard. Every post became a microscopic negotiation between who you actually are and who you think people want you to be. And that negotiation, it's not a one-time thing. It's constant, relentless. Every story, every photo, every just thinking out loud caption is another round of the same unconscious audition for belonging. Here's where it gets darker. The audition never ends because the role keeps changing. What got likes last month doesn't work this month. The tone that felt authentic yesterday feels performative today. You're not just keeping up with trends, you're keeping up with an invisible, constantly shifting standard of what makes you worthy of attention. It's a game where the rules change faster than you can learn them. One girl in her 20s described it perfectly. I'd post something and then I couldn't do anything else until I checked if people liked it. My mood for the entire day depended on whether I got validation from people I don't even talk to. That's not connection. That's not self-expression. That's relief-seeking. You're not posting because you have something to say. You're posting to temporarily quiet the anxiety of wondering if you still matter. And the moment you realize that's what you've been doing, everything changes. Nobody wakes up and decides, today I quit posting forever. It doesn't happen like that. There's no clean break, no dramatic exit, no manifesto about digital wellness. You just drift. 1 week becomes 2. 2 becomes a month. And before you know it, you've gone silent without ever meaning to. But here's what actually happened beneath the surface. Burnout. Not the kind you can point to, not the kind that comes with obvious symptoms. This was something quieter, more insidious. You got tired of thinking in captions, tired of mentally cropping your life into 9x9 squares, tired of having an experience and immediately wondering how it would translate to a screen. The pressure wasn't loud, it was constant. A low hum in the background of everything you did. You'd go somewhere beautiful and feel the split. Half of you was present, half of you was already drafting the post. You'd have a meaningful conversation and catch yourself thinking, this would make a great story. You weren't living anymore. You were performing life, narrating it in real time for people who weren't even there. And then one day, a question showed up uninvited that changed everything. Am I actually enjoying this, or am I just trying to prove I'm enjoying it? That question is a trapdoor. Once you ask it, you can't unfeel the answer. Suddenly, you notice the gap between the experience and the performance of the experience. You see how much energy you've been spending on the wrong audience. You realize the fun stopped being fun the moment you started treating it like evidence. This is the breaking point. Not anger, not defiance. Just exhaustion from maintaining a highlight reel that nobody asked for but everyone seemed to expect. You started keeping score without realizing it. I posted about my promotion. Better post something humble next or I'll look braggy. I've shared too much happiness lately. Need to balance it with something real. Every post became part of a narrative you were managing, a storyline you had to keep coherent, relatable, aspirational, but not alienating. It's not sustainable, and your nervous system figured that out before your conscious mind did. So you stopped. Not because you wanted to make a statement, but because continuing felt like a weight you didn't remember agreeing to carry. There's a psychological cost to posting that nobody warns you about. It's subtle, almost invisible, but once you feel it, you can't unsee it. Posting something beautiful makes it less yours. Sounds strange, right? You'd think sharing a moment would amplify it, cement it, make it more real. But the opposite happens. The second you post, that experience stops being privately held and becomes publicly interpreted. It's no longer just your memory. It's everyone else's opinion about your memory. You post a photo from a perfect evening and someone comments, "Must be nice," with just enough edge to make it sting. Suddenly that night isn't untouchable anymore. It's defended, explained, justified, or worse, you post something you're proud of and it gets 2 likes and complete silence. Now that achievement feels smaller, like maybe it wasn't worth celebrating after all. This is psychological ownership, and social media destroys it. Every time you share, you're handing over a piece of your internal world and allowing it to be judged, dismissed, misunderstood, or ignored. What was sacred becomes data. What was personal becomes performance. You think you're preserving the moment, but you're actually diluting it, spreading it so thin across other people's perceptions that it stops feeling fully yours. Here's an example that makes this hurt in the right way. You accomplish something significant, really significant, and your first instinct is to post it. But then you hesitate, and in that hesitation you realize, if you post this, you'll spend the next 3 days managing reactions, responding to comments, watching the likes, wondering why certain people didn't engage. That accomplishment, which should feel like pure internal satisfaction, now has strings attached. It's no longer a private victory. It's a public event that needs tending. Or think about this. You share a meaningful moment and someone makes a joke. Not mean-spirited, just casual. But now every time you think of that moment, their joke is in it. The memory is contaminated. What was yours alone now has someone else's fingerprints all over it. And then there's the narrative trap. You post about a win, so now you feel obligated to maintain that storyline. You can't show struggle next week without it feeling like whiplash. You've locked yourself into a character arc that has to make sense to strangers. Stopping isn't about secrecy, it's about protection. You're protecting your experiences from being flattened into content. You're keeping your highs and lows in a space where they can just exist without needing to justify themselves or perform coherence for an invisible audience. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about holding things close enough that they stay completely, unambiguously, undeniably yours. Not everyone stops posting for the same reason, and pretending they do misses something important. There are 2 distinct psychological paths that lead to silence, and while they look identical from the outside, they feel completely different on the inside. The first path is autonomy. You stop because you've outgrown the need for external validation. You've built an internal sense of worth that doesn't require constant reinforcement from an audience. Posting starts to feel unnecessary, even slightly ridiculous. Why would you interrupt a beautiful moment to perform it for people who aren't there? This version of silence feels like freedom. You become selective, intentional. Your life moves inward, not in isolation, but in depth. Conversations get longer. Friendships become less about maintaining an image and more about actual presence. You stop curating and start living. There's a lightness here, a sense of having dropped a burden you didn't know you were carrying. But there's another path, and it's driven by something much heavier. Some people stop posting because the pressure became unbearable. Every caption felt like a test they might fail. Every photo required 10 takes, 3 filters, and a full internal debate about whether it was good enough. The fear wasn't just about being ignored. It was about being misunderstood, judged, reduced to a single frozen moment that might not represent who they actually are. This is self-protection disguised as choice. You'd write something genuine, read it back, rewrite it, soften it, question it, and then delete the whole thing. Not because you didn't have something to say, but because saying it out loud felt like handing people ammunition. What if they think I'm bragging? What if this comes across wrong? What if nobody cares and I just look desperate for attention? The fear of being seen incorrectly becomes stronger than the desire to be seen at all. So, you go quiet. Not because you've transcended the need for connection, but because the cost of being visible started outweighing the benefit. You're not at peace. You're in hiding. The silence isn't sovereignty. It's avoidance of a stage that felt too risky to stand on. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Both paths are valid. One isn't more evolved than the other. Sometimes stopping is about reclaiming power. Sometimes it's about protecting yourself from a system that made you feel small. And sometimes, most of the time, it's a mix of both. The question isn't why you stopped. It's whether the silence you're living in feels like relief or resignation. This isn't just about personality. It's about conditioning. Your brain didn't randomly decide that posting feels important. It was trained, carefully, repeatedly, by one of the most effective reward systems ever designed: variable reinforcement through social feedback. Here's how the loop works. You post something. Your brain releases a small hit of dopamine in anticipation. Then the notifications start: likes, comments, shares, and each one delivers another tiny reward. Your brain learns sharing equals pleasure, attention equals worth. The loop tightens. But here's the trap. The reward is inconsistent. Sometimes you post and it explodes. Sometimes it dies in silence. That unpredictability is exactly what makes it addictive. It's the same mechanism that keeps people pulling slot machine levers. You never know when the next hit is coming, so you keep trying. And over time, something insidious happens. You stop experiencing life directly. You start thinking in shareable moments. You're at a concert, and instead of losing yourself in the music, you're mentally framing the shot. You're having dinner with someone you love, and part of your brain is workshopping the caption. You see a sunset, and your first thought isn't awe. It's, "This would do well." You've been conditioned to process experiences as potential content, to see your life through the lens of how it will perform for others. That's not living. That's auditioning in real time. And the cost? Your internal locus of control, the psychological term for where you locate your sense of worth, shifts outward. Instead of deciding for yourself whether something mattered, you wait for the crowd to tell you. A moment isn't meaningful because you felt it deeply. It's meaningful because it got validation. When you stop posting, you're not just changing a behavior, you're rewiring. You're teaching your brain that worth doesn't come from attention, that experiences can be significant without being broadcast, that you can feel good about something even if nobody else knows it happened. This is hard. Your brain resists it at first because the dopamine pathways are strong, well-worn, automatic. But here's what the research shows. People who take sustained breaks from social validation report increased emotional stability. Their mood stops swinging with the algorithm. Their satisfaction becomes less fragile, less dependent on external metrics that were never designed to measure what actually matters. You stop performing, and slowly, awkwardly at first, you remember what it feels like to just be. This isn't personality, it's reconditioning. And the silence you're sitting in right now? It's your nervous system finally catching its breath. Here's the thing nobody tells you about going quiet. It becomes a filter. When you stop posting, you stop broadcasting your life to everyone equally. And in that silence, something clarifying happens. You start noticing who actually checks in, not who likes your posts, who asks how you're doing when there's no post to react to. The relationships that required proof start fading. The ones that didn't, they get stronger. You realize most of your closeness with certain people was entirely mediated by an app. You thought you were connected because you saw their vacation photos and they saw yours. You commented on their updates, they reacted to your stories, and it felt like friendship. But when you remove the platform, there's nothing underneath. No texts, no calls, no, "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while." Just silence on both sides. And that stings at first. It feels like loss. But then you notice something else. The people who matter, really matter, didn't need your posts to remember you exist. They reach out because they want to talk to you, not because an algorithm reminded them you're alive. Your closest friend doesn't need to see what you're doing. They ask. Your mom doesn't wait for an update. She calls. One person described it perfectly. "I quit Facebook and found out who my real friends were. Turns out it was about 5 people. And honestly, that was clarifying." This is the paradox of going invisible. You lose the illusion of connection and gain the reality of it. Social media taught us that closeness means constant updates, that caring means engaging with content, that friendship is sustained through public interaction. But that's not intimacy. That's spectatorship. You're not close to someone because you watch their life unfold in curated snippets. You're close because you're in it with them, in the mundane and the meaningful, in private conversations that never need a caption. Going silent exposes something uncomfortable. Some people only liked the version of you that performed. They enjoyed your content, not your company. And when the content stops, so does their interest. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a revelation about the relationship. But the flip side is beautiful. The people who stay, they're undeniable. You stop wondering who cares because it's obvious. The noise falls away and what remains is small, solid, and real. Digital closeness versus genuine closeness. They're not the same thing. One is sustained by visibility. The other exists whether anyone's watching or not. And that difference, once you feel it, changes everything about who you let in and how you measure connection. Being unseen isn't the same as being insignificant. The people who stopped posting didn't disappear. They didn't reject connection or retreat into isolation. They just stopped asking the crowd to confirm they exist. And in that quiet space, something returns. Privacy stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like intimacy. With yourself, with the moments you choose to protect, with the life you're living when no one's watching. Identity isn't something you perform, it's something you form. In the silence, in the small choices nobody sees, in the experiences you hold close instead of holding up for approval. This isn't about being anti-social media. It's about remembering that your worth was never supposed to be measured in likes, that your life doesn't need a highlight reel to matter, that the best parts of being human happen off camera. You're not broken for going quiet. You're not missing out. You're just done auditioning. If this resonated, you're not alone. And if you want more videos that explain what your mind is doing beneath the surface, the psychology behind the patterns you're living but can't quite name, stay here. Subscribe. Not for content, for clarity.